Hello everyone, I'm Soma Mazumdar.
And I'm Orad Semsarzadeh, and welcome to Kanban Lab podcast. In each episode, we'll pick a common question and dive into a different aspect of Kanban, exploring its principles, practices, and applications, and answering that question.
Our goal in this podcast is to demystify Kanban and help listeners understand how it can benefit their teams and organizations through addressing the common misconceptions, clarifying concepts, and answering questions about Kanban.
All right, Soma, what have you heard recently about Kanban that you found it interesting or surprised you?
Well, I keep hearing things about Kanban, but this is something has really surprised me recently when I heard it coming from a coach. So someone said that Kanban is not good for team with low maturity. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I get their point because some frameworks like Scrum or Safe or Less, they come with some predefined policies and the way of working. And that might help team with low maturity that never work together or, there is a lack of trust between them to have something to start with. But at the same time, especially for team with low maturity, those predefined policy can be problematic because
Yes.
those framework don't consider the problem that those team have. And that's based on my experience. It's something that a lot of team struggle with. Have you
Yeah,
had experience that teams struggle with predefined policies?
of course. So in my opinion, also in my experience, the problem with any framework that has a lot of prescription is that it never takes into account the changes people have to go through. And that's where
Mm,
I find Kanban fits in very beautifully because of its change management principle. And it always recommends people to start where they are. So it's not heavy with too many changes at the same time. Rather,
mm,
it's, small experiments that you can put in as your practice to see that the behaviors are changing, and that's where the power of Kanban actually comes from. So
mm.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when people say that Kanban is not very disciplined, what are your thoughts on that? Like in your experience working with teams, working with organization, do you believe that Kanban is not very disciplined?
One of the Kanban practices, in fact, is to define a policy collectively and make it explicit. So make sure that everyone's agreed on the policy, how they want to work together, and make it visible. So if anyone has any question, we always refer back to those policies that team agreed. The thing is, a lot of times people not quite aware of all the Kanban practices. So they all heard about whip limit, but that's basically it. One thing Kanban is very useful is that it try to find a solution based on team and organization maturity. Unlike other agile frameworks that they don't really consider people's maturity and people's problem. They always come with a solution, and a lot of times people struggle to adapt with those new way of working because they're not ready for that. For example, when we time box and we ask everyone to you have to plan for next 2 weeks, for example, or next 3 weeks or whatever. A lot of organization that works with legacy application, they really struggle to slice the work to fit into that time box, right? And I'm not saying those policies or those predefined policies are not good or helpful. What I'm trying to say is that people are not ready for those practices and those policies. But in Kanban, we identify what level of maturity team and organizations at, and what is the actual problem they have today. And then we try to find a solution that solve their problem they have now. And they also ready for that. And because all the policy made collectively by a group of people, then people clear and agreed on those policy. And that's why it's easier for them to stick with that. However, it has a challenge. And the challenge, based on my experience, is that, for example, when you go with Scrum, you normally have a Scrum Master who coach the team and facilitate the team. But in Kanban, there is no one really to do that, or no one specifically needs to do it. So that might be the challenge, especially in organization with low maturity, that they need someone to coach the team and facilitate this decision making and help the team and organization to agree on something and how they want to work. And another challenge is we might have someone who start and initiate this change, but that person not necessarily experienced. And that's again, that can be a little bit challenging. So to start with, I think organization needs to start with someone who had some understanding and had some good experience with Kanban, and especially facilitation to help the people to agree how they want to work together. So what do you think, Soma? Have you had any challenges with the team with low maturity and get them agreed on some policies?
Yes. What you said, I loved, there are many gold nuggets in there. So the first
Mm,
one is the explicit policy. I believe that people are still not very aware what explicit policies could be and how powerful they could be for a team, for an organization. So most of the time they think it's the social contract.
mm,
It's much more than social contract. It could help people with decision making. You are not dependent on one person to decide what the team is going to work, because you have everything already agreed and put in the policies. What kind of work will get into your team, how would you prioritize them, everything is already there.
mm,
So that's one thing. I believe that still people need to understand the beauty and the power of that, so that it can be applied to any team with any maturity. The second thing is that the act of leadership at all level. That's another thing, is like it's the beauty of Kanban, that it doesn't want anyone to rely on roles, like one role, and create that dependency. Instead, it actually wants to help people to understand their responsibility and accountability when it comes to, continuous improvement, continuous flow. I do agree with you. When we are starting with Kanban, sometimes the problem or the challenges come from because there is not no one person who is acting like a scrum master, like who knows all about Kanban and help the team through it. However, there are, like, if the team lead, if the team manager, whatever role you are in, if someone from the team has undergone Kanban training or have understood what Kanban can do, they can still help the team.
mm.
And that's where I believe the progress will come from. So,
Yeah.
the third thing which you said about that Kanban looks at the maturity of the organization and the team, which is so powerful, right? Like, Kanban is not trying to prescribe something which is like pre-thought without understanding the problem. Rather, it is like, okay, if you are in a low maturity team, so first thing is that you don't trust each other. You have to act like a team first. So what can we do to do that? Like, how can we get the sense of responsibility and accountability in each of them, that you have a shared purpose? So that's where we start from. Once you
Mm,
get that, then the next step, and it
yeah.
has given you all the what do you say, like the steps towards reaching your goal, towards getting a high maturity team or organization.
Mm,
And it's all about, like understanding the context.
yeah.
And that's where I believe that Kanban can be applied to any team with any level of maturity, and it does have good discipline in it if you understand
Yeah.
the practices, the values. So you are not dependent on some pre-described, events to tell you what to do.
And you know what? Almost all organizations, they already have some sort of policies.
Yes,
That's why they have a product that serve their customers, right?
exactly.
So what we can do is rather than throw everything out and say, okay, whatever you've done before, it's rubbish and you need to completely work differently, we can always start with those policy and
Mm,
see which one works, which one can improve,
yes.
right? And
Yeah.
then ask people, all right, so what do you think we can do to improve this policy, for example, right? So it might be whatever, we don't know. That's the thing, rather than come with a solution and say, all right, everyone, the ideal situation is already defined and you need to work completely differently, and that has to happen over a short time, right? Maybe a few weeks or months, and that people who work in organization for a very long time, they struggle, right? So they've been a developer for 20 years or a business analyst for 30 years, right? So this is not just a role for people, but it's part of their identity, right? And if you go
Exactly.
and say, all right, forget about what you achieved in last 20 years. Yes, you are the development manager, but we don't need development manager, right? And then those people say, okay, I work a lot to achieve and become who I am today. And now someone come and say, all right, we don't need you, right? So clearly this person will resist to this change, right?
Mm,
And that's probably why after a very, very long time that we're practicing all those agile, practices and frameworks, we haven't seen they've been effective as such in last 20 years, right?
yes.
So maybe we can start with respecting people and their roles and the current policies
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
how they work and just see, what we can do to improve
Mm,
today, and then gradually over time we evolve and get where we think will be a good destination. And of course there is no end to this journey because you always can improve, and there is always things that
yeah.
today, for example, we think we need to change it like that,
Mm,
and then we change it, and after we practice it for a while, then we realize that, okay, what we thought 2 months ago was wrong or
yes.
didn't help us,
Yeah.
right? Because,
Yeah.
this is something I always tell people, that everything is a hypothesis until it happens. When it
Exactly.
happened, then either you prove the hypothesis or you say, okay, the hypothesis didn't work.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I would actually like to share a story, an experience. Uh, One of the teams I was working, they wanted to practice Kanban, so they came to me. And one of their problems was that, like the team had really low trust among each
Hmm.
other,
Yeah.
because most of the people in the team were from a vendor organization. So
Hmm.
they really didn't trust each other much. So I said, okay, let's try this. Let's change how we do stand up.
Hmm.
So you already have a stand up, and I can see what you're doing at the moment is that you're calling each person's name, asking them, like where they are with their
Hmm.
work. So that's mostly focusing on resource utilization. So I said, instead, why don't we focus on the work? So you have everything on the board. Let's just look at the things that, okay, what's happening on the board, and maybe talk to the board, like ask
Mm,
people where the work is and what can anyone do to help each other to get the work out faster. It's a
mm,
very simple practice. Like it's suggested in Kanban daily meetings
hmm.
that you read the board from right to left instead of
Yeah,
left to right. And
that's right.
that small practice is so
Hmm.
powerful because you are not focusing on each person. So when you do that, when people are new to any of the Agile framework, they're still in that mode of being micromanaged by
Hmm.
other people. So trust is something that gets to you at the end. Like it takes a long time to build up.
Yeah, you gain
You
trust.
gain
No
trust.
one born with trust.
Exactly. You cannot, like, yeah, trust cannot be just, like acquired by, like, okay, we are agile from today.
Mm,
Uh, and that small practice helped the team to understand that, okay, no one is managing people. We are trying to manage the work in the best way possible. So let's talk through the work rather than through the people who are doing the work. And it really helped the team to
yeah,
understand that shift in the mindset that, okay, it's not about resource utilization, it's about
that's right.
value. And that's why, I mean, I'm in love with Kanban because of the reason of this simple techniques, simple practices, which can be so powerful to unlock better potential in people.
Yeah, and you know what? You talk about a group of people that there was no trust between them, or there was a lack of trust between them. In this situation, people don't see themselves as part of the team,
Exactly.
right? They still see themselves as a group of individuals, right? So I'm Orod, this is my goal. I don't
Mm,
care about the
yeah,
tester. I don't care about BA
yeah,
stuff like that. Just give me my work, right?
yeah.
So I like to a little bit focus on this scenario and see what we can do, for example, right?
Mm,
So when people don't see themselves as part of the team, rather than push them and keep saying, no, you are part of the team,
yeah.
focus on the customer value and the team outcome, right?
Mm,
That kind of thing. And people still don't see themselves as part of the team.
mm,
So maybe, what we can do is rather than have a board for everyone,
yeah,
we can have a board only for Aura and have
yeah.
a separate board only for Soma,
Mm,
right? And say, all right, you just visualize your work for yourself. You don't even need to show it to anyone if you don't want to.
mm,
If you're happy, let it do it, right? And then over time, when Orod realized that, first of all, how many work Orod is doing,
yeah.
right? And why I'm too busy, right?
Mm,
And then I've noticed that a lot of my work needs to be, for example, picked up by Soma and Soma continue
mm,
doing something, right?
mm,
And until Soma won't finish her job, my job is not necessarily finished because Soma keep coming back and ask me question and ask me
mm,
to change this and that. And I realize that, oh, I'm doing lots of context switch, right?
mm,
So after a while, then Orod understand that he's not working separately,
mm,
but he's part of another person and he has dependency to another person who is
yeah,
Soma. So now we can go and say, all right, and Suma, do you want to put your work next to each other so we have a better visibility on what you're working on and what has dependency to Soma or blocked by Soma,
yeah.
right? And then gradually, again, over time, they realize that, okay, I'm not individual, I'm part of a team, a bigger group of people. And then we can say, all right, now we can focus on a team outcome rather than individual outcome, right? So
Yes.
that's basically what I'm saying, for because we're talking today about low maturity team, right? Because if the
Yes.
team's mature enough and there is a trust, then of course we have less problem. It's easier. We can focus on the outcome and the team work rather than individual work. But in low mature team with lack of trust, people still focus on individual goal. And I keep saying that continuously in multiple teams in different organizations that we go and say, all right, we have a user story, it's a teamwork. And then people, the team member and their manager come and say, what about the task? Can we
Mm,
break this story into tasks so we have visibility on individual work, right?
mm, mm.
That's to me an indicator that still they're not in that level of maturity, in
No.
team focused level of maturity. They're still in individual focused maturity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So rather than we keep pushing them, and I understand there are, I think, two school of thought about this. One, a group of people believe that we need to change the environment,
Mm,
and when we change the environment, then people adapt, and
yeah.
those who don't adapt, they leave,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's probably the consequence, right?
Yeah.
And we can see that a lot of people after all these agile transformation, a lot of people leave because they don't see value or they confuse or they don't like it, so they don't see anything. It's like I'm leaving, right? And leaving knowledge worker, which probably we can talk about knowledge and knowledge workers separately
Mm.
because that's a big topic
Top.
itself. But
Yes.
leaving knowledge worker, has a big impact on organization because knowledge is very valuable, right?
Yes.
So when someone leave, it's not just one person left and we can replace it easily with another person.
Mm.
It's one person plus 20 years of experience and knowledge leave, right?
Yes.
And it's not easily replaceable,
Mm.
right? So that's one school of thought, which has its own pros and cons, of course. Another school of thought, which I think I personally closer to this one, is that rather than change the environment completely, regardless if it's for a good reason, right?
Mm.
And I understand everyone does it for a good reason, right? But see the current way of working, because as I said,
Mm.
uh, I was talking to someone else a while ago, and that person said, I'm working with a bunch of dinosaurs, right? And I told him that, these dinosaurs, they build a product
Mm.
who serve 10 million people,
Yes.
right? So they know
Mm.
what to do,
Yeah.
right? So you can't say these people don't know anything, right? Because
Mm.
whatever they build, it's serving people and people already using it, including myself,
Mm.
right? Using their service and product, right?
Mm.
I use it, you use it, a lot of
Of
people in
course.
Australia use it, right?
Yeah.
Same with a lot of other organizations. So rather than change everything, we can just first of all respect them and say, okay,
Yes.
we respect you, we understand that you know what to do,
Mm.
but what you need to do is to see a little bit out from outside of the system, because a lot of time people, when they work inside the system for a very long time, they become part of the system
Yes.
and they see that, okay, this is how it always work
Mm.
and this is how it should work and continue working. There is no other way around it, right?
Yeah.
And then someone like me or yourself comes and look and help them to see the problem from different angle
Mm.
and help them without throw everything out,
Mm.
help them how they can improve, but improve gradually and
Yes.
step by step. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And yes, it takes probably a while,
Mm.
uh, but at least first of all, people happier, people accepted the change easier,
Mm.
right? And they understand that we build those systems to work for us, right? We
Yeah.
don't need to work for the system, right?
Exactly.
If the system needs to change, which always needs to change, then we change the system, but we change it slowly and gradually.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good point, and I believe we have a lot of takeaway from our episode today. One would be respect for people and their current roles. That's really important. The second is that explicit policies that can help team
Mm.
to evolve gradually instead of changing everything overnight. Third thing is that act of leadership at all level. So respect that, try to promote that whenever possible. And I love the idea of the gaining trust gradually instead
Mm.
of just telling everyone that okay, you are in a psychologically safe environment, you have
Yes,
trust.
you are part of Avengers.
Yeah. That's true. So yes, like try and put in practice which will help the team to trust each other and help them to see that they have a shared goal instead of they all are individuals and they are all doing their own thing. So
Mm.
that would be, these are few steps that any team or organization or people can do to help team with low maturity to get on the journey and start their journey. So
Yep.
that's good. Actually, we got a lot out of today's episode, and if anyone has any
Yeah,
question
I hope
regarding,
audience also see some value in this
yeah,
chat.
yes, and if anyone has any more ideas, how can they help team with low maturity using Kanban, please reach out to us or put a comment or whatever way you feel is
That's
best.
right. And also, you don't need to necessarily call it Kanban,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Just get together and see what you can do to improve.
exactly.
You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah, it's all about improvement. So remember that that's the message we want to pass on today. So, or any last thought?
No, I think it was good for the first episode. I'd like to hear more about other people. What was the experience they had with the team or organization with low maturity, and what was the approach they taken? What was the benefit or the challenges they faced? And share their experience with us and everyone else.
Yes, that's right. So we are going to end our first episode with this note. So everyone take care and hopefully this is valuable to you as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll back next week.
Yes.